So the next step that we're going to move on to is this is the front part of my outer frame. This is piece A of the outer frame. I've rotated this. So this is the inner frame. I'm up here on the front side of the inner frame. The back side is back there. Driver side, passenger side. So again, this is my piece A of my outer frame. This is the inside. It should have your two wiring holes cut here and the seam if you cut out your pieces correctly. So I just wanted to show you, the next thing we're going to be doing is welding these little ears on, and I just wanted to show you this before we actually go over the measurements and as far as the placement of these goes, as the purpose of them, so it'll all make more sense in the second half of this video. So these are basically just to hold this front piece in place, and then we're just going to use this to clamp this into place. So that's what these are used for. These are not permanently welded, they're just tack welded, because as soon as we get the rest of the outer frame on and all tacked together, we're going to cut these off, and these are just going to go away after we solid weld the outer frame to the inner frame. So these are just assisters in helping us get this whole thing put together. So I'm going to reverse engineer this and show you the actual measurements and how to do this coming right up. What you need to do for this step is get your piece A of your outer frame. I have mine here. I've rotated this frame, so this is my inner frame. The front is up here with me, and the back is back there. And then, again, set your piece A of your outer frame, the inside up. It should also have your two wiring holes cut in each side. And also what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to cut two approximately 3 to 4 inch long pieces of your 2 inch wide by 3/16 thick flat bar like I've done here. Doesn't have to be exact, but approximately 3 inches. So pause the video, go cut those, and then once you come back, we'll go on to what's next. After you get those cut, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to center this from side to side on your inner frame. So it doesn't need to be exact yet, but just kind of measure from the outside of your inner frame long pieces to the edge of your piece A of your outer frame. And you're going to want to make sure that that measurement is the same on both sides so that you know it's relatively centered. Again, it doesn't have to be exact, but just a ballpark. So mine is centered side to side. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to draw a couple lines that are the length of your flat bar right over the top of both of your long inner frame piece A's. So I got my lengthwise inner frame piece here, and I have a 3 inch line drawn right here that's directly over the top of this piece. I've done the same thing here. I got a line right here directly over the top of this piece. The next thing you're going to do is, this is basically going to be a shelf that we're going to tack weld on, and then we're going to rotate this and actually hang it off of the front of our inner frame, but I'll go over that next. So your lines need to be, I forgot to mention this earlier, your lines need to be 1 3/4 from the top edge down to your line on both sides. So 1 3/4 down, and then you're going to put your, so this side here that the camera is looking at, which is actually the bottom of this piece, needs to be lined up with that line. So not the front side that's facing towards me, but this back side edge right here needs to be lined up with your line that's 1 3/4 from the front edge. And if you have these little 90-degree magnets, these are going to be really handy right now. If not, you can just use regular square. But this is definitely the easiest way I've found, is to use these small little magnets. So line, like I said, this edge that's towards the bottom side up with your line that's 1 3/4 from the top edge, and then you're going to tack weld both corners. Get a nice heavy tack on there, but don't tack weld this side here, because we want this, when we hang this on this inner frame, we want it to go flush against the bottom, so don't put any welds in the seam down here. So I tacked it in 3 places. I tacked it the corner on the edge here, corner on the edge here, and then also on this top side I put one in the crevice up here, which I would do that, so 3 positions. I'm going to do the same over here on the other side. So again, what this is going to be the bottom side, the face that's facing towards the camera is going to be lined up with your line. That's 1 3/4 inches from the top edge. Same deal, 3 position tack. So after you got your assister ears welded on, that we're actually going to hang this thing on here, the next thing you're going to do is what I've already done here is just hang it off the front side and clamp down these ears to your main frame or your inner frame pieces. And then after that, the next thing that you need to make sure happens is you're going to need to make sure it's centered exactly side to side. So basically just measure from the outside of your inner frame cross or lengthwise pieces here to the edge, and it should be the exact same measurement for both sides. Once your measurements are exactly the same, then you know you have it centered, and then you're going to tack weld piece A of your outer frame to the piece A's of your inner frame. Do not tack weld right here because we're going to cut these ears off after we have this thing tack welded to this. So tack weld in the seams on the sides of the connection of these 2 pieces. I would throw 4 tack welds on each junction. After you got it tack welded, you can take your clamps off and then cut your 3 tack welds off of each of these. We're going to use these pieces to hang the sides the exact same way we hung this front side. At this point, you should have your piece A of your outer frame tack welded to your 2 piece A's of your inner frame like I have here. So you're looking at the front of the flatbed is right here. This is the passenger side outer frame piece, and that's the driver side outer frame piece over there. So the next step that we're going to need to do is cut out stake pocket holes. Note that this step is optional. However, even if you aren't planning on putting bed rails, adding bed rails to your pickup, I would recommend putting these in anyway because you might want to add them down the road, and it's going to add value to your pickup. If you sell it to somebody, they're going to be appreciative of the fact that they can add bed rails if they want to. So again, not required, but recommended for sure. Refer to your blueprint, the outer frame section. It's going to have all the measurements for where exactly you need to put these stake pocket holes in reference to the front outside corner. So again, just refer to the blueprint. It's going to lay it out clearly exactly how you need to space these. And so as you can see here, I got 3 on top of both sides, and there's also 3 holes on the bottom side. The reasoning for this is you just want the weather, the rain, and moisture to be able to go straight through your frame. So that's the reasoning for this. So everywhere that you cut a top side stake pocket hole, you also need to cut one on the bottom side. So you should be able to look through and see daylight through both of your stake pocket holes. To cut these holes, you can either use a slitter disc on your grinder or your plasma cutter or a cutting torch. Don't worry about getting them completely perfect. Just make sure that we're gonna put some 3 by 2 inch tube in these holes and then weld up the outside, so they don't have to be perfectly cut. Don't worry about that part. Just make sure they're pretty close. So yeah, either one of those tools, either your plasma cutter or your slitter disc. By now you should have your stake pocket holes cut in both of your side pieces if you're going to be adding bed rails. That is optional, but if you do have bed rails that you're wanting to add and put in stake pockets, you should have 6 in each side. So 1 here and 1 on the bottom, all the way down and over there as well. So 12 total holes you should have just cut in both of your side pieces. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to hang our side pieces, our piece B's of our main outer frame, just like we hung the front earlier with our 2 little shelf jigs. that we tack welded on here and used it to set on our inner frame. So in order to do that, we're going to need the spacing for where to weld our two shelf pieces. These are the ones that I used earlier to hang the front piece. Go ahead and cut those off. We're going to reuse those for this side and then cut them off again and reuse it for the driver's side. So the way you're going to get the spacing for how far back to put these is we're going to start by measuring from the front outer corner of our piece A. So hook your tape on that and then measure back to the center of your first outside cross member of your inner frame. Write down the measurement that it is the center. So for example, mine is 43 inches from the front outside corner to the center of this cross piece. So I'm writing down 43 right here. Your number might be different depending on what model of pickup you have. And this measurement, also going to do the same thing. Measure back from the front to the center of this and write that measurement down on here. Mine's 71. Yours might be different depending on your model. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to mark those measurements on our piece B of our outer frame. So this is my passenger side piece. So my first measurement that I have here, whatever your measurement is, measure back that far. So mine was 43 that I have written down here, so I'm going to measure from the front corner there, 43 inches, draw a line that's 43 inches from the front outside corner. Same thing for this measurement. So I wrote 71 here, I'm going to measure back 71 inches, draw a line. After that, the next thing we're going to do is what we did. We're going to pretty much repeat the process for what we did on the front outer frame piece. So this is the inside of my outer frame piece B, passenger side. So make sure it's the inside. The short side should be up. Your seam should be on this side if you did it correctly. So on the top here is where I drew those lines that we just measured from. And then I drew a mark that's about 3 inches long that is 1 3/4 inches from the top edge. Basically what we're going for here is we want this to be at the same level as this piece here. So when we put it on, the edges of this piece and the edge of our side piece should be at the same plane. So we did 1 3/4. This measurement here should be 1 3/4 from the top of your inner frame to the top of your outer frame here. That's what we're going for here, the same exact measurement. So again, I have my line drawn, 1 3/4 inches from the top. We're going to put the bottom side of our shelf jigs, line them up with that, and then tack weld it on. So just for clarification, this bottom side here should measure 1 3/4 from the bottom side to the top side of your outer tube. You want to make sure that this is welded at a 90-degree angle. I have 90-degree magnets. You can also use your square. And we're going to tack weld it in 3 positions. Do not tack on this bottom seam because it needs to rest flush on top of this cross member. Same thing on this second measurement, which should correspond to the second cross member right here. Bottom side should be 1 3/4 inches from your top edge. You can see here I got my 2 shelf jigs welded on that are going to assist us in hanging this piece B. This is the passenger side outer frame piece. So we're pretty much just going to do exactly what we did for the front piece. We're just going to hang this off of here, and then I'm going to slide this up towards the front until it butts up with my front piece up there. Then I'm going to clamp this. Don't tack weld anything yet. We're going to make sure that everything up front here is good. So up here you should have, it should be matched up pretty much perfectly if your angles were cut correctly. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to clamp this and tack weld this first. So This is one of the rectangles that is a cutout from one of these light holes. You can use one of these. And also, I have a large C-clamp. If you got a vice grip that has a 6-inch bite, that will also work too. But basically, I'm gonna clamp this with my piece of steel right here. And what this does is it clamps these two pieces of metal so that they are at a flush plane, so we can weld this seam up and then grind it off, and it's gonna be a perfectly seamless and smooth surface. So, like I said, don't tack weld anything back there yet until you have dealt with this front corner. A couple things to make sure, just to make sure everything is true, is your outside piece B of your outer frame should be tight against your two cross members there. You should be able to look down at it and not see any daylight between them. And then this should be clamped with your scrap piece using a clamp to make sure that it's a flush plane up here. And then you're going to go ahead and throw a couple tack welds on the inside seam. So I did a 4-position tack down at this corner. I got the inside corners here and then your two outside corners. After you get that tacked on, you're going to go ahead and tack weld your outer frame to these cross members. Don't tack on your shelf jig, just like the front. Make sure they're tight against your cross members, and I like to tack 2 on each side. So 4 positions on each junction. So, repeat the process for the other side. You're going to cut these 2 shelf jigs off, go do the same exact thing on the other side, measure back, get your measurements, tack weld these on, put it on, butt it up against the other corner, tack weld everything. After that, we'll be able to move on to the next step. Alright, so this portion of the video is for those of you that are building dually beds. So if you're building a dually bed, obviously you've been following your blueprint up to this point for all of your inner frame pieces and all of your side pieces. So on the side pieces, this is the only part that's going to be different in comparison to the single rear wheel beds is these sides, because these sides are gonna, I'm over here on the driver's side part of the dually bed here, and these sides are actually gonna be straight on the back 2/3 of the bed and then taper to the front so that the front of the bed is 7 feet wide and the back of the bed is 8.5 feet wide. So in order to do that, we're going to have to make our sides taper starting here and then taper towards the upper corner. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to cut a section out of our tube, and I'm going to show you how to do this in a second. And if there's any part of this as far as measurements or angles that you don't understand, refer to your blueprint. It's going to lay it out clearly for the dually beds. Exactly how far, what angles, all of that is going to be laid out clearly in your blueprint. So here we got the driver's side side piece, the outer frame for dually beds. This is the front up here. The back is back there. Your stake pocket holes, your marker lights, all of those are going to be the same spacing as single rear wheel beds that I will go over in the video. The only part that's different is we're going to cut this section out so that we can actually taper this front side to the front corner of the bed, which I'm going to show you here in a second. So refer to your blueprint. It's going to lay this out clearly. But in almost all cases for these dually beds, check your blueprint just to make sure. You're going to measure from the front outside corner back 30 inches and make a little mark. And then from there, we're going to draw a section out of this. And we're going to get our slitter disc and we're going to cut this section out, because we're going to cut this section out and it's going to allow this tube to bend, and that's going to be the front part of our tapered side. So I'm going to cut this out with a slitter disc. Refer to your blueprint, but in almost all cases this is going to be an 18-degree section. So in other words, you're going to draw a line 30 inches back from the front outside corner, and then you can either use your speed square or a angle calculator, and then from your mark that's 30 inches back, if it's an 18-degree section, check to make sure, then you're going to go 9 degrees each way. So I'm going to turn my square to a 9-degree angle, and draw a line. And then That's going to give me this top section here, and then wherever those lines intersect, we're going to draw lines down the inside. I don't know if you can see them here, but there's two lines down the inside that match up with where these sections come out. These section lines come to the inside. So it's basically, we're just going to notch a triangle out of this thing. So you're obviously going to use your slitter disc to cut the section down these two lines, and then also there's going to be a section on the bottom side as well. So this is all going to become clear when I cut this out. I'm going to cut this out and show you how this looks at the end. But basically, measure 30 inches back from your front corner, draw an 18-degree section. All this is in the blueprint, and that's going to allow us to bend this and taper it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this and show you what it looks like finished product. So if you don't understand what I'm saying, it's going to make it clear when I show you that after I cut it out. Alright, so this is what the finished product should look like. As you can see, I have a wedge shape notched out of the inside of, this is the driver's side side piece of the dually bed. So what this is going to allow us to do is bend this front part of this at an angle, and we're going to mount it, and it should match up perfectly with the front piece if you follow your blueprints and cut everything angles thus far. So obviously make sure the wide part, the opening part, is on the inside, and make sure you notch it all the way to the edge, but don't cut the outside obviously, but just make sure it's notched all the way to the edge. That way you can bend it all the way closed. If you did this correctly, you should be able to close it and it will be at the proper angle. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to mount these sides the same way we do a single rear wheel bed, but we'll just have the angled bend to deal with, which I will show you next. After you got your section cut out, the next thing we're going to do is put our shelf jigs on here, kind of like we did the front outer frame piece, to hang these on the side and get it lined up. So what you're going to need to do is lay your piece B of your outer frame for your dually bed on the bed like I have here. So this is the inside of piece B facing up. This is the top side that's facing out towards me. And then I have this front side. As you can see, my piece is already a little bit bent because we cut out this notch. Line up your front side approximately with the front side of your piece A of your outer frame. Just make sure the front's lined up, and then make an approximate mark where your cross members are going to intersect with your outer frame. So what we're going to do is just line it up the way it needs to be front to back. Draw a couple lines where your cross members are, and then we're going to put these shelf jigs 1 3/4 inches down from the top side, which is this face that's facing out towards me. We're going to put the bottom side of our shelf jigs 1 3/4 inches from the top side of our piece B of our outer frame, and we're just going to set these front to back where we made our marks, where it's going to intersect with our cross members. That's what we're going for. Alright, so as you can see here, I got the side piece hung. This is the driver's side. The front's up here, the back is towards the camera. So basically what you're going to do is mount this to where it looks like when you bend this front piece in that it's going to match up approximately with the front edge of this. And then after you get that approximately matched up, you're going to clamp these 2 shelf jigs to your inner frame, and then you're basically just going to fine tune it after that. Move it forward or backward as you need to until these 2 angles match up perfectly. So you should be able to push this snug with your front piece, and it should line up. So if you need to move it forward or backwards a little bit, just kind of adjust and fine tune back and forth until you can push this in and you get a perfect snug fit when you push the 2 together. So after you get it to that point where it's the correct placement front to back, I'm going to show you real quick how to match up this front corner. It's going to be the exact same way we match up the front corner on single rear wheel beds, but just a little specialty for you guys with dualies. It is slightly different, but same concept. So we'll show you that next. I got the bed turned around. What you guys are looking at right here is the driver's side front corner of this dually bed. I'm just going to show you how to match up this front corner to get it nice and flush. And then it's pretty much going to be exactly the same way we do a single rear wheel bed, but it's just slightly different since we got this taper up here. So the easiest way to do this is to get yourself a large C-clamp. If you don't have a C-clamp, you can get this done without one. It's just going to be a little more difficult. What we're trying to do here is match up these top edges so that they're perfectly flat with each other, so when we weld it and grind it off, it's a nice flat surface. So I just got a piece of flat bar. This is the cutout from one of our light holes. You can use something like that, it doesn't really matter. But then I'm just going to use my body to push this in and then use the clamp to clamp this piece of steel. And that's going to hold these two pieces of metal flush and simultaneously hold this corner together. And once you have it matched up nicely, you can just tack weld the four corners, the outside corners and then the inside corners on the back side as well. So get that nice and matched up, tack welded, and then other than that, we're just going to repeat everything that we have just done on this side piece on the other side, obviously. And besides this, everything as far as video goes is going to be exactly the same as single rear wheel beds, with the exception of, obviously right here, you're going to have a little crack and then your crack down the inside and the bottom where we cut out this section. So you're just going to need to solid weld this seam up and grind it off. But other than that, everything else is going to be the exact same as the single rear wheel bed. All the differences are just going to be covered in your blueprint. So this is the only part that's different. Repeat this on the other side and then just continue with the rest of the video series. It's going to cover everything as far as what you need to do to finish the bed.